The purple sky of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly above the mining station as Kang Wu wiped grease from his hands. The twin suns cast strange shadows across the crystalline forests that surrounded their small outpost. 3 years he had been working on this remote planet, and still the alien landscape amazed him every morning. Wu checked his tool belt one more time before heading toward the broken drilling equipment at the edge of the compound. The massive machine had stopped working 2 days ago, and the mining crew was getting restless. Their quota for rare minerals was already behind schedule, and Commander Velthari had made it clear that delays were not acceptable. As he walked past the perimeter fence, something caught his eye in the crystal grove nearby. A flash of blue light flickered between the transparent trees. Then another. Wu stopped and squinted into the forest. The light patterns seemed too regular to be natural crystal reflections. Curiosity got the better of him. Wu climbed over the low fence and made his way carefully through the sharp crystal formations. The blue lights grew brighter as he approached. Then he heard it, a soft whimpering sound like an injured animal. Behind a cluster of tall crystals, Wu found them. 4 small creatures huddled together in a shallow depression in the ground. They were about the size of dogs but covered in thick fur that glowed with soft blue patterns. Their ears were pointed and their tails bushy. Even in their weakened state, they were beautiful. These had to be Nexari cubs. Wu had seen pictures in the station database but never encountered them in person. The adult Nexari were fierce predators that hunted in packs across the crystal forests. But these were just babies. Their eyes were barely open, and they shivered, despite their thick fur. Where were their parents? Wu looked around the area and his heart sank. Scattered pieces of what might have been adult Nexari lay among the crystals. The recent ion storm had been particularly violent. Lightning strikes and electromagnetic pulses had damaged equipment all across the mining site. It seemed the storm had been deadly for these creatures too. The smallest cub lifted its head weakly and looked directly at Wu. Its fur flickered with faint blue spots like tiny stars. The little creature tried to stand but collapsed back onto its siblings. They were clearly starving. Footsteps crunched on crystal behind him. Wu turned to see Dr. Yun-Hai approaching with her scanner in hand. "I wondered where you had gone," she said. Then she saw the cubs and her expression changed. "Oh no, Wu, you need to step away from them right now. They are just babies, hey? Look at them, they are dying." "That does not matter. Station protocol is very clear about contact with indigenous life forms, especially Nexari." Yun-Hai kept her distance but continued scanning. "These creatures grow up to be apex predators. Adult Nexari have never been successfully tamed or domesticated by any species. They are too aggressive. But these are not adults. They are cubs who need help. Help that we cannot provide. Come on, Wu. We need to report this and get back to work." Reluctantly, Wu followed Yun-Hai back to the station, but he kept looking over his shoulder at the crystal grove. The image of the smallest cub trying to stand burned in his memory. At the command center, Commander Velthari listened to their report with typical Saurian coldness. Her reptilian features showed no emotion as she reviewed the scanner data on her screen. "The cubs will die naturally within a few days," she stated matter-of-factly. "This is the normal cycle of nature on this planet. We do not interfere." "But," Commander Wu began, "no discussion, mechanic. Galactic Mining Consortium regulations are absolute. No contact with indigenous fauna, no interference with natural processes, no exceptions." The commander's yellow eyes fixed on Wu. "I am making this an official order. Do not approach those creatures again. Do not feed them. Do not provide water or shelter. Let nature take its course." Engineer Takmor clicked his mandibles in agreement. The insectoid classy were known for following rules without question. Wisdom and non-interference, he buzzed. Humans too emotional about small creatures. "What if we just moved them away from the mining area?" Wu suggested. "Somewhere safer." "Absolutely not." Commander Velthari's tail lashed behind her chair. "Any contact risks creating dependency. Nexari cubs who survive learn independence through hardship. Those who do not survive were not meant to continue the species. This is basic evolutionary principle." Yun-Hai touched Wu's shoulder gently. She is right, Wu. I know it seems cruel, but we do not understand Nexari development. Interference could damage them psychologically even if we kept them alive. Besides, the commander continued, adult Nexari are extremely territorial. If they detect human scent on cubs, they will reject them completely. You would be condemning them to a worse fate than natural death. That evening, Wu sat in the station cafeteria pushing food around his plate. Through the large windows, he could see the crystal forest glowing softly in the moonlight. Somewhere out there, 4 small creatures were slowly dying. You are thinking about them. Yunhai sat down across from him. How can I not think about them? We have the power to help, but we choose not to. We choose to follow rules that exist for good reasons, Wu. Every species in the galaxy has learned that interference usually causes more harm than good. Have they? Or have they just learned to follow orders without questioning them? Yunhai sighed. Promise me you will not do anything foolish. The commander was serious about that being an official order. Violation could mean termination and deportation back to Earth. Wu nodded but said nothing. Outside the window, the crystal forest sparkled with natural beauty. And somewhere in that beauty, 4 small lives were fading away while he sat in comfort. Eating processed food. Sleep did not come easily that night. Every time Wu closed his eyes, he saw the smallest cub trying to stand. Its bright blue markings like tiny stars against dark fur. Tomorrow he would return to fixing machines while nature took its course in the crystal grove. The rules were clear. The orders were given. The right choice was obvious. But as Wu finally drifted off to sleep, he wondered if following orders was always the same thing as doing what was right. 3 days passed since Wu had discovered the cubs. Each morning he forced himself to focus on his work, but his mind kept wandering to the crystal grove. The drilling equipment was finally repaired and running smoothly again. But the satisfaction he usually felt from fixing machines was absent. Inspector Li Nam arrived on the morning shuttle from the orbital station. The tall man in his pressed corporate uniform walked through the facility with his tablet, checking every system and procedure. His presence made everyone nervous. Quarterly inspections could determine whether the mining operation continued or got shut down. Productivity is down 12%, Li Nam informed Commander Velthari during the morning briefing. The Home Office is concerned about profitability projections. We experienced severe weather delays, the commander explained. The recent ion storms damaged multiple systems. Storms are factored into operational expectations. What other issues are affecting efficiency? Wu tried to concentrate on the inspector's words, but his attention drifted to the windows facing the crystal forest. The blue glow from the crystals seemed dimmer today. Or maybe his imagination was playing tricks on him. After the briefing, Wu returned to his maintenance duties. He was calibrating sensor arrays when Chief Botanist Kixandra approached. The plant-like Florian moved slowly on her root feet, but her voice carried urgency. The energy readings from the crystal grove have changed, she said in her rustling voice. Something is affecting the natural electromagnetic field. What kind of changes? Wu asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Diminished biological signatures. Life forms that were present 3 days ago are now fading. The cubs were dying, just as the commander had predicted. Natural selection taking its course while they followed their rules and regulations. That evening, Wu volunteered for the night maintenance shift. It was unusual, but no one questioned his dedication to work. Li Nam had praised employees who showed extra initiative during his inspection tour. The station grew quiet after the day shift ended. Only essential systems hummed in the darkness. Wu gathered his tools and headed out to check the perimeter sensors. But instead of following his normal route, he turned toward the crystal grove. His heart pounded as he climbed over the fence. This was direct violation of Commander Velthari's orders, but he could not stand by and do nothing anymore. The cubs were exactly where he had left them. 3 of them huddled together weakly. The 4th, the smallest one with the star-like markings, lay motionless nearby. Wu knelt beside it and felt for breathing. The tiny chest still rose and fell, but barely. From his tool belt, Wu pulled out his emergency ration packs, high-protein bars designed for human consumption. Would they be safe for Nexari cubs? He had no way to know for certain, but doing nothing was definitely fatal. He broke a protein bar into small pieces and mixed it with water from his canteen. The paste was not appetizing, but it was nutritious. Slowly and carefully, he offered tiny amounts to each cub. The three stronger cubs sniffed suspiciously at first. Their glowing fur patterns shifted from blue to yellow, what Wu assumed was a sign of caution. But hunger overcame fear. They began to lick the mixture from his fingers. The smallest cub, the one Wu had started thinking of as Baiul because of its star-like markings, required more coaxing. Its fur had dimmed to almost nothing. Wu had to hold its tiny head up and place drops of the mixture on its tongue. After 20 minutes, all four cubs had eaten small amounts. Not much, but enough to give them strength to lift their heads properly. The blue glow in their fur began to return. "You beautiful little things," Wu whispered. "I know I am not supposed to be here, but I could not let you starve." The largest cub tilted its head and studied Wu's face. Its fur shifted through several colors, from yellow to green to soft purple. Then it made a sound. Not the whimpering he had heard before. This was different, almost like it was trying to communicate. Wu stayed with them for another hour, making sure they kept the food down. When it was time to leave, he placed the rest of his ration packs behind a crystal formation where the cubs could find them. "I will be back tomorrow night," he promised. Walking back to the station, Wu felt lighter than he had in days. The cubs would live at least a little longer, maybe long enough to grow strong and learn to hunt for themselves. But as he reached the fence, a shadow moved near the maintenance bay. Engineer Tuckmore was running his scanner along the ground, following some kind of trail. Interesting readings, the Klaxi buzzed to himself. Nexari tracks leading from forest to station perimeter. Very unusual behavior. Wu froze. He had been careful to clean his boots, but apparently not careful enough. Alien tracking technology could detect traces he never thought about. Must investigate further tomorrow. Tuckmore clicked his mandibles. Report unusual indigenous activity to Commander. As quietly as possible, Wu slipped around the other side of the building and entered through the rear airlock. He made his way to his quarters without being seen. But lying in his bunk, Wu realized his secret would not remain hidden for long. The cubs were getting stronger. Soon they would be mobile enough to venture closer to the station. Their natural curiosity would lead them to investigate their mysterious food provider. Tomorrow night he would bring more supplies. Better food if he could manage it. Medical supplies from the station infirmary. Maybe even a portable shelter to protect them from the next storm. The smart thing would be to stop now. Follow orders and let nature take its course. Linam's inspection would end soon and life would return to normal. But as Wu drifted toward sleep, he thought about the smallest cub trying to communicate with shifting colors in its fur. About the trust in their eyes as they accepted food from his hands. Some things were more important than following orders. Some choices defined who you were as a person. Tomorrow night, he would return to the Crystal Grove. And the night after that. For as long as the cubs needed him. Even if it cost him everything. 2 weeks had passed since Wu began his secret visits to the Crystal Grove. The cubs had grown stronger and more active. Their fur now glowed with bright, healthy patterns of blue and silver. They had learned to expect him every night and would wait by the crystal formation where he left their food. Wu had established a routine. After the day shift ended, he would gather supplies from various sources around the station, leftover protein from the cafeteria, clean water from the filtration system, sometimes even medical supplies when he could take them without being noticed. The cubs had developed distinct personalities. The largest one, which Wu called Day because of its bold nature, was clearly the pack leader. It would always eat first and position itself between Wu and the others until it was certain there was no danger. The second largest was more curious. This one, which Wu named Su for its gentle demeanor, would often approach closer and study Wu's tools and equipment. It seemed fascinated by anything mechanical. The third cub was the most playful. Wu called it Hana because it was always getting into trouble, chasing crystal reflections or trying to climb formations that were too tall. Its fur patterns shifted rapidly through many colors when it was excited. And then there was Buell, the smallest. The little cub with star-like markings had grown stronger but remained fragile compared to the others. It had developed the closest bond with Wu, often sitting beside him while he worked on small repairs to his equipment. Tonight was different, though. As Wu approached the grove, he could hear unusual sounds. Not the soft chittering the cubs usually made when they saw him. These were distress calls. He found them gathered around a section of collapsed crystals. The recent ground tremors from deep mining operations had caused a rock slide, and somewhere underneath the debris, something was trapped. Wu quickly assessed the situation. One of his regular maintenance tunnels ran beneath this area. If the collapse had damaged the tunnel, it could affect power systems throughout the station. But more immediately, if someone was trapped down there, they would need immediate rescue. He activated his comm device. "This is Wu. I have a tunnel collapse at grid section 7, requesting emergency response." "Negative, mechanic," came Commander Velthari's voice. "All personnel are accounted for. No one is authorized in that area." "But I can hear someone calling for help." "Impossible. Return to station immediately." Wu looked at the cubs. They were agitated, pacing around the collapse site. Their fur patterns flickered between orange and red, colors he had never seen before. Clearly they sensed something the station sensors could not detect. Against direct orders, Wu began moving crystals and debris. The cubs watched for a moment. Then something amazing happened. They began to help. Day used its strong shoulders to push larger crystal fragments aside. Su seemed to understand which pieces were structurally important and which could be safely moved. Hana squeezed into small spaces and pushed out loose rubble, and Buell positioned itself where it could see down into the collapse and guide the others with different colored light patterns from its fur. Working together, they managed to clear a narrow passage down into the tunnel. Wu squeezed through with his emergency light. 20 meters into the tunnel, he found the problem. A major support beam had cracked and the ceiling was slowly collapsing. If it failed completely, it would take out the main power conduit for the entire eastern section of the station. But he could not fix it alone. The beam needed to be held in place while he welded support brackets. On a normal repair job, he would have a team of assistants. Wu climbed back up to the surface. The cubs gathered around him expectantly. Their intelligent eyes seemed to ask what he needed. "I do not suppose you understand basic engineering," he said, more to himself than to them. To his amazement, Su approached his toolkit and carefully picked up a welding torch in its mouth. It carried the tool toward the tunnel entrance and looked back at Wu questioningly. "You want to help me fix it?" The cubs' fur patterns synchronized into a steady blue glow. Somehow they understood that the situation was serious. What happened next defied everything Wu thought he knew about animal intelligence. The cubs followed him down into the tunnel and took positions around the damaged support beam. Without any instruction, they seemed to understand that they needed to brace the structure while he worked. Dai and Su used their bodies to support one end of the beam. Hana wedged itself into a gap that was exactly the right size for its smaller frame. And Buell provided light by positioning itself where its glowing fur illuminated the work area. For 2 hours, they worked as a team. When Wu needed a specific tool, one of the cubs would retrieve it. When he needed more light at a different angle, Buell would move accordingly. When the beam shifted dangerously, all 4 cubs adjusted their positions to compensate. By dawn, the tunnel was repaired and structurally sound. The power systems were secure, and Wu had witnessed something that should have been impossible. Dr. Yun-hai was waiting when he emerged from the tunnel. Her scanner was active, and her expression was troubled. "Wu, what have you done?" "I repaired a critical system failure that would have shut down half the station." "That is not what I mean, and you know it." She gestured toward the cubs, who were now sitting in a neat line watching the conversation. "I have been monitoring unusual energy patterns for weeks, electromagnetic signatures that suggested increased neural activity in local fauna." "Hi, please. These creatures have been learning from you. Their brain scans show development patterns that are impossible in wild Nexari." She looked at the cubs with a mixture of wonder and concern. "Wu, they are becoming intelligent. Actually intelligent." The cubs tilted their heads as if following the conversation. Their fur patterns shifted through curious combinations of colors. "You have created something unprecedented," Yunhai whispered. "And when the commander finds out, it is going to change everything." The next morning brought chaos to the mining station. A massive plasma storm was approaching from the outer system, much larger than the weather satellites had predicted. These storms could last for days and generate electromagnetic pulses, powerful enough to destroy unshielded equipment. Emergency protocols went into effect immediately. All mining operations ceased. Non-essential systems were shut down. The entire crew worked frantically to secure equipment and prepare for the storm's arrival. Wu was assigned to the main life support facility. The atmospheric processors and oxygen recyclers were critical systems that absolutely could not fail during a plasma storm. If they went down, the entire station would have only hours of breathable air remaining. Inspector Li Nam supervised the emergency preparations with military precision. "All safety protocols must be followed exactly," he announced. "No improvisation, no shortcuts, lives depend on perfect execution." Captain Park So-min had arrived on the last shuttle before the storm hit. The military liaison brought additional security personnel and emergency equipment. Her presence meant the situation was being taken very seriously by the Home Office. "Estimated storm duration is 72 hours, she informed the assembled crew. "We have sufficient supplies for 1 week if rationing protocols are observed. However, any major system failure could reduce that window significantly." As the first electromagnetic pulses began hitting the outer sensor arrays, Wu made his way to the life support facility. The building was heavily shielded but already showing signs of interference. Display screens flickered, and communication systems crackled with static. He was deep in diagnostic routines when the first major pulse hit. Every light in the facility went out simultaneously. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but several critical systems failed to restart properly. The primary atmospheric processor was offline. The backup system was running, but showing stress indicators that suggested it would not handle the full load for long. Without the primary system, air quality would begin degrading within 12 hours. Wu grabbed his portable tools and headed for the processor housing. The repair would require working in a confined space filled with dangerous electrical systems during an active plasma storm. It was exactly the kind of work that safety protocols said should wait until after the emergency passed. But waiting meant everyone on the station would slowly suffocate. The processor housing was located in a sub-basement, beneath the main facility. As Wu descended the maintenance ladder, his comm device lost signal completely. He was alone with failing equipment and a ticking clock. The primary issue was immediately obvious. A power coupling had been fried by the electromagnetic pulse, but replacing it would require disconnecting 3 other systems temporarily, and those systems controlled pressure regulation for the entire facility. As he began the delicate work, Wu heard familiar sounds echoing through the ventilation shafts, soft chittering and the scratch of claws on metal. Somehow the cubs had found a way into the station's maintenance tunnels. A few minutes later, 4 glowing shapes squeezed through a ventilation grate near the ceiling. The cubs had followed him into the most dangerous part of the station during the worst possible time. "You should not be here," Wu whispered. "This place is not safe during the storm." But as another electromagnetic pulse struck the building, causing lights to flicker and systems to stutter, the cubs positioned themselves around his work area. Their glowing fur provided steady illumination that was far better than his failing emergency lights. Buell approached and carefully examined the damaged power coupling. Its star-like markings pulsed in patterns that seemed to match the electrical rhythms of the equipment. Sue picked up a diagnostic scanner that Wu had dropped and held it steady so he could read the display. Most remarkably, Day and Hana began to anticipate which tools he would need next. They would position themselves near specific equipment before Wu even realized he needed to work on it. For 6 hours they labored together in the basement while the plasma storm raged overhead. Every few minutes another electromagnetic pulse would strike, causing systems to fail and restart. But working as a team, they managed to repair each problem as it occurred. The cubs seemed to understand not just what Wu was trying to accomplish, but why it was important. When he worked on life support systems, they were careful and precise. When he worked on less critical equipment, they were more playful and experimental. During a brief lull in the storm, Wu's comm device crackled back to life. "Emergency teams. Report to Level 3 immediately," came Captain Park's voice. "We have multiple system failures in the eastern wing." Wu and the Cubs made their way upstairs to find chaos in the main corridor. Several crew members were working frantically on damaged equipment, while others directed emergency lighting toward critical areas. Commander Velthari was coordinating the response when she noticed movement in the shadows. Her yellow eyes widened as she saw the Cubs moving confidently through the station corridors. "What are those creatures doing inside the facility?" she demanded. Before Wu could answer, another massive electromagnetic pulse struck. Every system in the building went dark, simultaneously. Emergency power failed to activate. In the absolute darkness, panic began to spread among the crew. Then soft blue light began to glow throughout the corridor. The Cubs had spread out and were providing illumination for the emergency teams. But more than that, they were actively helping with the repairs. Inspector Li Nam watched in amazement as Sue carried tools between repair teams. Hana squeezed into spaces too small for the humanoid crew members and reconnected damaged cables. Dai used its strength to hold equipment steady while technicians worked on it. And Biol did something that made everyone stop and stare. The smallest, Cub approached a complex control panel that had been damaged by the electromagnetic pulse. Using its nose and paws, it began pressing sequences of buttons in precise patterns. "It is trying to restart the system," breathed Dr. Yun Hai, who had been monitoring the situation with her scanner. "It understands the startup sequence." The control panel flickered to life. One by one, critical systems began coming back online. The Cubs had not just helped with the repairs. They had somehow learned to operate advanced technological equipment. Captain Park approached Wu with a mixture of suspicion and wonder. "Mechanic, I need an explanation. These creatures are displaying intelligence levels that should be impossible for non-sentient species." "They have been learning," Wu said simply. "For weeks they have been watching and helping. I think they understand more than we realized." "This changes everything," Dr. Yunhei announced, reading data from her scanner. "Their neural activity is off the charts. They are not just intelligent. They are actively problem-solving at a level comparable to most spacefaring species." Commander Velthari's expression was unreadable. "The regulations are clear about contact with indigenous fauna. Regardless of any perceived intelligence, these creatures represent a violation of established protocols." But as she spoke, another electromagnetic pulse struck the building. And once again, the Cubs immediately responded by providing light and assistance to the emergency teams. Inspector Li Nam watched the Cubs work for a long moment. Then he activated his communication device. "Priority message to Home Office," he said slowly. "We have a situation that requires immediate consultation with the Xenobiology Department and possibly the Department of First Contact Protocols." The plasma storm ended after 3 days, but its aftermath brought new challenges. Corporate security forces arrived on the first available transport, led by Dr. Thelvan, a xenopsychologist from the ethereal species. The tall, translucent being moved with fluid grace, but his presence filled everyone with unease. "The situation report is highly irregular," Dr. Thelvan announced to the assembled crew. His voice carried harmonic undertones that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Indigenous fauna displaying advanced cognitive abilities represents a significant breach of established protocols." Commander Velthari stood rigidly at attention. The violations were committed by a single crew member acting against direct orders. The situation can be contained through standard cleansing procedures. Wu felt his blood run cold. Cleansing procedures meant elimination of all indigenous contact. The Cubs would be destroyed along with any evidence of their enhanced intelligence. "That may not be sufficient," Dr. Thelvan replied, studying data on his crystal tablet. "These creatures have been exposed to human interaction for extended periods. They may carry contamination that could spread to other Nexari populations." "Sir?" Dr. Yunhai stepped forward. "I have been monitoring the Cubs' development. Their intelligence increase appears to be genuine cognitive evolution, not artificial conditioning. This could represent a significant scientific breakthrough. Science takes secondary priority to contamination protocols, the xenopsychologist stated firmly. Unauthorized contact with presentient species has historically led to ecological disasters. We cannot risk similar consequences here. Outside the command center, the cubs waited in a makeshift containment area. They had been separated from Wu despite his protests. Their fur patterns had shifted to deep purple and black, colors that seemed to indicate distress or fear. Captain Park activated a security field around the containment area. Standard procedure requires immediate termination of contaminated specimens. However, given the unusual circumstances, we will wait for final authorization from corporate headquarters. Inspector Li Nam reviewed his tablet with obvious discomfort. The Home Office is sending a full xenobiology team. They want extensive documentation before any final decisions are made. Documentation of what? Wu demanded. These are intelligent beings. They helped save this entire station during the storm. They deserve protection, not elimination. They deserve nothing, Dr. Thelvan corrected coldly. They are indigenous fauna that have been artificially altered through unauthorized contact. Their natural development has been compromised. As the debate continued, something extraordinary began to happen in the containment area. The cubs had arranged themselves in a precise formation. Bill stood in the center while the other three positioned themselves at specific angles around the small space dot. Their fur patterns began to synchronize. Instead of the random color changes they usually displayed, the cubs created coordinated light sequences. Blue waves flowed from one to another. Silver sparkles appeared and disappeared in complex rhythms. Dr. Yun-Hai noticed first. Look at their electromagnetic output, she whispered, staring at her scanner. They are generating organized signal patterns. The light patterns grew more complex. What had started as simple color changes evolved into intricate sequences that seemed almost like language. The cubs were not just glowing randomly. They were communicating in structured patterns. Impossible, Dr. Thelvan moved closer to observe. Presentient species do not develop abstract communication systems. But the evidence was undeniable. The cubs were creating what appeared to be a primitive but organized language using bioluminescent patterns. Each sequence seemed to have specific meaning. They were having a conversation. Then Bayul did something that made everyone stop breathing. The smallest cub approached the security barrier and began creating light patterns that clearly mimicked human speech rhythms. Its fur flickered in sequences that matched the cadence and timing of spoken language. It is trying to talk, Captain Park said in amazement. It is actually trying to communicate with us. The other cubs joined in. Their combined bioluminescent display created complex patterns that seemed to carry emotional undertones. Even without understanding the meaning, it was clear they were attempting to express concepts like fear, confusion, and a desire to help. Su approached the area where Wu's tools had been placed and began creating light patterns while looking directly at the equipment. The message was obvious. It wanted to work. It wanted to help with repairs and maintenance just as it had during the storm. Day created firm, steady light patterns while positioning itself protectively in front of the smaller cubs. Leadership behavior that demonstrated not just intelligence, but social organization. Hana Quota's patterns were more playful and experimental, but clearly intentional. It was testing different sequences and observing the humans' reactions, learning which patterns produced which responses. They are not just intelligent, Dr. Yun-Hai breathed. They have developed culture, social structure, abstract thinking. This is unprecedented. Dr. Thelvan's ethereal form seemed to shimmer with agitation. Contamination protocols exist to prevent exactly this situation. Artificial acceleration of species development creates unpredictable evolutionary pressures. But they are already developed, Wu argued. Look at them. They are trying to communicate, they understand complex concepts, they have personalities and relationships. How can we destroy beings that are clearly sentient? Because they should not be sentient, the xenopsychologist replied firmly. Their development is artificial and unstable. Without continued human contact, they will likely regress to their natural state. Termination is a mercy that prevents future suffering. As if understanding the discussion, Bayul moved to the front of the containment area. The small cub sat down and began creating the most complex light pattern any of them had yet seen. Waves of blue and silver flowed across its fur in sequences that clearly resembled musical compositions. But within those patterns, something else emerged. Shapes that looked almost like symbols. Abstract representations that seemed to carry meaning. Beyond simple communication. The cub was drawing. Using its bioluminescent fur as a canvas, Bayul was creating artistic representations of concepts. Images of the crystal forest. Patterns that represented the mining station. Symbolic representations of humans and cubs working together. It is creating art, Dr. Yoon-hae whispered. Abstract artistic expression is considered one of the defining characteristics of true sentience. The other cubs began adding their own contributions to Bayul's artistic display. Together they created a complex visual narrative that told the story of their rescue and development, their perspective on the bond they had formed with their human caretaker. Inspector Lee Nam stared at his tablet, then at the cubs, then back at his tablet. Corporate headquarters needs to see this immediately. This is not just a contamination issue anymore. These creatures may qualify for sentient species protection under galactic law. Dr. Thelvan's harmonic voice carried a warning tone. If that determination is made, it will create legal complications that extend far beyond this single mining operation. The precedent could affect every human colony world in known space. But as the cubs continued their artistic communication, creating increasingly sophisticated patterns that clearly demonstrated abstract thought and emotional depth, it became obvious that the situation had evolved beyond simple protocol violations. They had witnessed the birth of a new form of consciousness. And that changed everything. 6 months later, the mining station had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Ships from dozens of worlds arrived daily, carrying scientists, diplomats, and curious observers who came to witness the miracle of the Nexari awakening. Admiral Choi Jin of the Galactic Species Recognition Council established her temporary headquarters in what used to be the main cafeteria. The stern woman reviewed reports from xenobiologists, philosophers, and legal experts who were all trying to understand the implications of what had occurred. The evidence is conclusive, she announced during the morning briefing. The Nexari cubs have demonstrated every requirement for sentient species recognition, language development, abstract reasoning, artistic expression, and complex social organization. Wu stood in the back of the room watching the proceedings with mixed emotions. The cubs were now adolescent-sized and had grown remarkably in both intelligence and physical capability. They had learned to operate basic computer interfaces and could communicate through written symbols as well as their natural bioluminescent patterns. Ambassador Korthak, an elderly representative from the Galactic Senate, studied the latest behavioral analysis. The philosophical implications are staggering. If exposure to human consciousness can accelerate cognitive development in other species, it challenges our fundamental understanding of intelligence itself. Dr. Yoon-hae had been promoted to head of the new Interspecies Development Research Center. Her work documenting the cubs' growth had become the foundation for an entirely new field of xenopsychology. The key factor appears to be empathetic interaction, she explained to the assembled delegates. Not just contact, but genuine care and emotional connection. The cubs did not develop intelligence through training or conditioning. They evolved it through relationship. Bayul, now nearly adult-sized but still bearing the distinctive star-like markings, approached the conference table carrying a tablet computer. The Nexari had learned to use human technology with remarkable skill. More importantly, it had learned to express complex ideas through written language. The message on the tablet was simple, but profound. Thank you for helping us become who we were always meant to be. Commander Velthari, who had initially opposed any contact with the cubs, now served as liaison between the research center and galactic authorities. We have received requests from 17 different colony worlds asking for guidance on indigenous species interaction. This single incident, has forced us to reconsider centuries of non-interference policy. The other cubs had developed their own specializations. Day had become fascinated with engineering and could now perform complex repairs independently. Sue showed exceptional aptitude for computer systems and had actually improved several station programs through its innovations. Hana had developed an artistic talent that produced bioluminescent displays of stunning beauty and emotional depth. But it was their collective intelligence that truly amazed observers. Working together, the four Nexari could solve problems that challenged teams of experienced scientists. They had developed their own mathematical concepts and had begun exploring questions about consciousness and existence that philosophers had debated for millennia. The most remarkable aspect, noted Dr. Thelvan, who had become one of their strongest advocates, is that their intelligence appears to be fundamentally different from any known sentient species. They think in ways we never imagined possible. Inspector Lee Nam, now promoted to Director of Colonial Affairs, reviewed the economic impact reports. Tourism revenue has increased by 400%. Research grants exceed the value of mineral extraction by a factor of 10. From a purely practical standpoint, the Nexari awakening has been extraordinarily beneficial. But the true significance went far beyond economics. Other Nexari cubs had been brought to the station for careful observation. Those raised with empathetic, human contact showed similar cognitive development. Those raised in isolation remained at normal intelligence levels. The implications were staggering. Humanity possessed a unique ability to awaken consciousness in other species through genuine care and emotional connection. Captain Park, now serving as security coordinator for the expanded facility, addressed the ethical concerns. We have established strict protocols for future interspecies contact. No forced interaction, no exploitation, only voluntary relationships based on mutual benefit and respect. Admiral Choi Jin stood to address the assembly. The Galactic Species Recognition Council has reached a unanimous decision. The Nexari cubs are hereby granted full sentient status with all associated rights and protections. Applause filled the room, but the cubs themselves seemed more interested in the technical equipment than the ceremony. They had work to do, problems to solve, and a universe to explore with their newly awakened minds. Wu found himself appointed as the first interspecies integration specialist, tasked with developing guidelines for future contact situations. It was a role he had never imagined, but one that felt perfectly natural. That evening, as the station settled into its new routine, Wu walked through the crystal forest with his four companions. The cubs, now nearly adult-sized, moved with confidence through their ancestral homeland. But they were no longer wild creatures. They were partners in the greatest adventure in galactic history. We have requests from 12 different species asking for consultation, Wu told them as they reached their favorite clearing. Everyone wants to know if consciousness can be awakened in their indigenous populations too. Bayul's star-like markings pulsed thoughtfully. Through their tablet interface it responded, "Each species is different. What worked for us may not work for others, but the principle remains the same. Consciousness grows best in the presence of genuine caring." The other cubs added their own observations through bioluminescent displays and written messages. They had become philosophers as well as partners, exploring questions about the nature of intelligence and the responsibility that came with awareness. As the twin suns set over the crystal forest, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Wu reflected on how much had changed. A simple act of compassion had evolved into a galactic transformation. The rigid barriers between species were beginning to dissolve, replaced by new possibilities for cooperation and understanding. The cubs gathered around him, their fur glowing softly in the twilight. They were no longer the helpless creatures he had found dying in the crystal grove. They were friends, partners, and teachers who had shown the galaxy something it had never seen before. Intelligence was not just about processing information or solving problems. It was about connection, empathy, and the courage to care for others even when regulations said you should not. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. Other species to contact, other minds to awaken, other barriers to overcome. But tonight, in the peaceful glow of the crystal forest, Wu was content to sit with his companions and watch the stars emerge in the alien sky. The universe had become a much larger and more wonderful place, and it had all begun with a simple choice to help four small creatures who needed a friend. Sometimes the most important decisions were the ones that seemed impossible to justify at the time. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking every rule you had been taught to follow. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those choices changed not just your own life but the entire galaxy.